Hello, welcome. So, it's time to talk about books. I am now in Kuching, my hometown. I'm here for the break. Um, so yeah, I think I'll probably have more time to read for pleasure right now. Yay! Anyway, in this video, I am going to talk about books that I wanted to talk about for a while now because I finished these books a few weeks ago. Well, the last book that I'm going to talk about in this video, I finished that in like last week. So it's not too long ago, still pretty recent, still kind of fresh in my mind, and it's pretty random collection, I would say. Well, okay, the first two books are going to be Asian literature set in modern time, whereas the last book would be an American novel. I think it was published in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. The story itself was set in around 70s, I think. Anyway, let's start with the first one, and this is Love in the Big City by Sang-Young Park, and this book was translated from Korean to English by Anton. This book was a buddy read, again with the same person that I mentioned in the last video, Brian from Instagram, a friend of mine with whom we talk about books frequently, and also other random stuff, but yeah, books for the most part, because that's what I usually do on Instagram for the most part. Anyway, yeah, this is a Korean novel, and it centers around this young man named Young, who is a gay person. He's gay, and basically this book is about his experience being a gay man, a young gay man, having to navigate his life in a society in which he doesn't feel completely, I would say, very safe to be really open in about his sexuality. This book is written in this kind of like sort of disjointed 4-part structure, and these 4 parts can actually be treated as a separate short stories, but when they are combined together in the order, the way that this novel does, you could get some kind of coherent story, because the way that this novel orders these stories is that it's chronological, and so you could sort of see that in all of these short stories, the main character is always going to be the same person, this character named Young, this young man, and it's pretty much about his experience as a gay man in slightly different context or situation. And because it is the arrangement is chronological, you can also get a sense of development. When you read this book from the beginning to the end, you could get a sense of growth, of change in this novel. And so in that sense, you can get that kind of coherence that you would find in a traditional novel, basically. But let's say if you want to read this book, just pretty much pick a random chapter, right? That could work as well, because all of the chapters in this book, because they're short stories, they can stand alone. It's totally fine. They can totally stand alone, but together they feel cohesive. So yeah, that's my assessment of the structure of this book. In terms of the story itself, now each of these 4 different sections, like I said, they deal with Young's experience as a gay man in Korea, mostly set in Seoul, I think. Yep, in the city of Seoul, and just like what I mentioned earlier about how there is this kind of shift in his attitude and also his outlook about himself and his sexuality and his life, and etc., etc. There is a variety of I would say context being explored in all these different sections. Like, for example, the first section, which I think really works as the first section of this book, is pretty much about how he lives with another woman who could sort of, in a way, support him as a gay man. How does that support works? Well, you just gotta read the story. I don't want to be accused of spoiling things. But yeah, it's kind of interesting because when I think about a gay novel, immediately, one of the first things you would think of is, of course, relationship, and of course it's gonna be like about stuff like gay relationship, focusing more on that, or at least that's what I would expect. But the first story doesn't really go straight into that territory, but rather it goes into an area in which is, I would say, is part of the gay experience, but it is also a bit on the periphery, if you know what I mean. Yeah. But I feel like it is able to sort of ease you into the life of this character, because it gets you, it welcomes you into his life in a way that you don't feel like you're plunging into relationship drama right away. And even so, you are able to experience the kinds of anxiety this character experiences. I mean, anxiety about his sexuality and his life is definitely a constant theme in this book. You could also get this feel of discomfort, but at the same time, this book also shows moments of little victories or little happiness, pockets of happiness that this character has in this book as well. But yeah, the subsequent chapters, of course, there will be deeper dive into relationship-based stories. When I'm talking about relationship, I'm talking about romantic relationship. The first story focuses more on some kind of friendship. Yeah, I feel like the structure of this book works quite well also. Another thing I want to comment is that even though this book is set in Korea, I'm not even... I don't think that this book is going to feel very foreign, because much of this book is going to talk about the character's gay experience. And I feel like the gay experience that this character is talking about, aside from how he has to sort of try to reconcile some aspect of his sexuality with his society, or figure out ways on how to sort of navigate his society despite his sexuality, despite his identity and all that, it doesn't feel like there are plenty of really new things or unfamiliar things, but rather many of the things in this book, if you have read, if you are an LGBT person yourself, or if you have read a bunch of queer literature, many of the things in this book you will find quite familiar, and I would say pretty universal. So yeah, I would say I guess readers would be able to find some catharsis in this book, or even comfort, even though some of the stories in this book could border or enter more uncomfortable territories, but I feel like readers could also derive some kind of comfort from this novel. So yeah, that's what I think about Love in the Big City by Sang Young Park. Now, let's move on to the second book. This is Idol Burning by Rin Usami. This book was translated from the Japanese by Asa Yoneda, and this book is about this character. I forgot this character's name. Okay, her name is Akari, and she's a Japanese teenager. This book is set in modern Japanese society. Now, the thing with Akari is that she is a big fan of a member in a pop group, right? And she pretty much is, she worships this member. So basically, this book is about idol worship or fandom culture. Akari, she is so enamored by this singer that a major part of her life is centered around this singer. She has a personal shrine set up for this singer. She would buy merchandise, albums, anything related to the singer, anything that she'll do anything that she can within her power and capability to support this singer's career. However, one day, this singer has been reported to assault a fan, which obviously caused a bunch of controversy among the fans of the singer and also the group the singer is in. And eventually, Akari would have to sort of deal with the blowback from this. Like, not all her life, but for a big part of her life, she has always been following the singer. She has always been a big fan, big supporter of the singer. And suddenly this singer has done something that is quite terrible. So what would she do, And how would that affect her life, And this book is pretty short. It's slim. It's it is easy to read. The language is simple because most of the not most, but the entire book is narrated through Akari's point of view. Like, she narrates the story herself, and therefore the language of this book is also quite simple, very fitting to the voice of a teenager. And so one might expect that this book could be quite shallow, which was actually my first, not my first impression, but my expectation of this book. And that was wrong, which was great, because as I read this book and when I reached the ending, I thought this book was wonderful. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, which meant that I liked it. Even though this book is about fandom culture, or idol worship, which is, I would say, I think a lot of us would agree that many people view these as something frivolous, right? You see teenage girls clamoring about some boy bands or some celebrities, and you think that, oh my gosh, that is so shallow. Well, whether it is shallow or not, that's beside the point. But what I like about this book is that the author takes that and use it as some kind of example to illustrate what could happen if something that a person set as the pillar of their life, what if that pillar suddenly just collapses or burns, and this book, there's a lot of comments on that. And I feel like this is something that can be applied to many other situations. And in a way, you could sort of expand the idea that this book is trying to deliver beyond the confines of idol worship and apply it to so many other things. This book feels very relevant, and I would say it is very much relevant today. I really like the direction that this book takes. I really like the way it ends. I really like how it explores the character's development and journey in a pace that is quite consistent, that is not rushed, even though it is a short book. I feel like this book feels sufficient. It is able to deliver what it intends to deliver, I assume, based on the words that it has. So this is a nice book. I definitely recommend everyone to try this book. It's a quick read, but I do really think that this book is quite punchy. Anyway, the third book that I'm going to talk about, which is something I don't have with me right now, because it was something that I borrowed from a free library at a mall near my university. That would be Kaye Gibbons' Ellen Foster, and I think a lot of people would know this book. So this book is an American novel. Kaye Gibbons is American, and this was her debut novel, I think. It was published perhaps sometime in the 80s. I might be wrong. I think it was the 80s. And it is about this young girl named Ellen who starts out with her family. She has a mom who is somewhat sickly, and eventually something happens to the mom. And at the same time, she is also living with her father. Her father is abusive and alcoholic, and so overall her family situation is not good, very much dysfunctional. And she grew up in this kind of unhappy family, but later on in this novel she would end up being under the care of various caretakers, and this novel pretty much follows her as she moved from one caretaker to another, and how her life just sort of changed with all of these movements, all of these shifts in her environment, and the people that are supposed to take care of her and protect her, but yet many of those people would eventually end up failing to do so. So there is something that is a little bit Dickensian about this book as well. There is poverty. There is also things like abuse, substance abuse, and mental health issues. Also, is definitely something that would come out in this book. Dysfunctional family situation. This is the kind of book that might be difficult to read for some people because of these subject matter. But at the same time, this book is also quite short. It is pretty, I would say it's pretty fast-paced. One thing that I note about this book is that the voice is pretty interesting. On one hand, I kind of like how the voice feels kind of unique, in the sense that it does feel like it is something being that came out from the mouth of a 10-year-old girl. I think she's 10 in the book. But here's the thing, even though I said that it sounds somewhat like something a 10-year-old would say, because this book is narrated by her, right? The character, Ellen. There are parts in this book in which the voice certainly sounds like an adult woman's. There would be sudden moments of wisdom appearing out of nowhere, which is kind of jarring, and I have to remind myself that yes, this narrator is 10 years old and she is narrating the story as the events are unfolding, because her narration is in the present tense. And you know what? This is like one of those times that in which I really pay attention to the tenses in a book, in an English book, because I usually never pay attention to tenses. Because in 3 of the 4 languages that I speak, we don't really use tenses the way English does. Our verbs are the same regardless of temporal situations. So yeah, I would remind myself the tense is in the present tense. So she is 10 years old as she is narrating, and so her voice has to be 10. But yeah, there are times in which suddenly she would sound like an adult woman. But anyway, it didn't bother me so much. It was okay. Now another thing is that this book, I would say after a while, you would sort of notice some kind of repetition in this book, because this book would pretty much follow Ellen as she moves from one caretaker to another. And oh, by the way, I forgot to mention the setting of this book. It was, I think it was sometime in the 70s. It takes place in the American South. So yeah, anyway, back to the repetition part of the plot. Like, this book is about this character moving from one caretaker to another, from one place to another, and eventually there would be some kind of repetition, or not repetition, but repetitiveness, that make this plot feels kind of formulaic and predictable. And that sense of novelty eventually wears out, and yeah, at some point it does feel kind of boring a little bit. Now, another thing about this novel also is that it is not 100% chronological in terms of its plot. There would be moments of flash forward that would give you hints of what would happen eventually in Ellen's life a bit later. And I think the fact that the author made this stylistic choice does present, or does give this story a bit of that I would say interesting flavor, because when you know, if this book were to be written in chronological order, then it's more like you are wondering what would happen to her later, what would happen to this character Ellen later, eventually, in this with this caretaker, with that caretaker, what would be her eventual fate. But in this book, already, I think in the first few chapters, you would already know what would happen to Ellen later in her life, and I think that sort of changes the gear of this book a little bit. It changes the overall vibe of it. I don't want to talk in detail about how it does that, but definitely there is a bit of change. It's kind of different from how it would be if it were to be written in this like completely chronological style. So yeah, that's what I think about Ellen Foster by Kaye Gibbons. So yeah, I think that's all for today. I have finished 2 books, and if I could finish 1 more book, then I'll have another recent reads for you guys. So yeah, that's all for this video. Let me know if you have read any of these books, if you have any comments about these books, if you like or dislike or hate them, or anything else. How's the weather at your place today, where you live right now? Because here, I was from KL like 4 days ago, and 4 days ago my mother and I flew to Kuching. So I've been in 2 cities in Malaysia, and it has been really hot, like super hot, like hot. Okay, it is so hot here. But yeah, I mean, that's the weather, climate change. Anyway, there may be thunderstorms tomorrow. Yeah, I kind of miss that. But anyway, I'll let you know if that happens. But yeah, for now, I wish you guys a wonderful day ahead, and Bye.